Rings of Power has many problems, but one of them is the portrayal of Galadriel. Let's break it down and how they took an epic and brilliant character and one of the most important characters in literary fantasy and turned her into Bella from Twilight. I'm not joking. Like, sub, do the usual, and if you want early access to content or exclusive content, please consider joining my Patreon or becoming a channel member. Let's start the show. Galadriel's portrayal in Rings of Power misses the mark. I hear a lot of excuses that it's her first age and this and that, and she's younger here. That's not how it works, and don't forget they don't have the rights to the first age. Amazon's Rings of Power was one of the most anticipated series in years, and to me it was a bitter disappointment. It promised to take fans back to the Middle Earth in a story that predated the events of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. On top of the bad writing, bad pacing, and countless other issues, I think the portrayal of Galadriel is not great. The show's visuals and world building are less than impressive, and her characterization feels off. To many, she seems like a Mary Sue, a character so perfect and overpowered that it makes her less relatable and interesting. She reminds me of characters like Bella Swan from Twilight, where it always seems to revolve around her. A blank slate character designed for people to project themselves into rather than anything else. Galadriel, written by Tolkien, is one of the most compelling figures in his lore. She was wise, powerful, and regal, yet flawed in her own right. However, the version of Rings of Power seen in Rings of Power is far from the nuanced, complex character. Instead, she comes across as almost childlike, an angry teenager, with almost few weaknesses or vulnerabilities. A Mary Sue is often described a character as almost too good to be true, someone with no real flaws who effectively overcomes every obstacle, and those journeys lack any meaningful struggle. And honestly, her character falls into this category in many ways. An unstoppable warrior. From the very first episodes, Galadriel is depicted as an unmatched warrior, leading battles, scaling mountains, and taking on foes far more easily than any other elf around her. While Tolkien's Galadriel is undoubtedly powerful, she is never depicted as an action-oriented warrior like Aragorn or Legolas. Her powers come from wisdom and knowledge and a deep, ancient magic. By focusing so much on her physical power, the show distorts her essence. The lack of consequences. Galadriel's actions throughout the series rarely come with any meaningful consequences, whether it's defying her commanders, disregarding advice, or making reckless decisions. She faces little to no fallout, and in Season 2, when it turns out that she's wrong, she's still not getting any consequences for her actions. Characters who never have to face the repercussions of their actions quickly become boring, and it makes their journey feel hollow. And one of the fundamental issues with the way that Galadriel is portrayed is her lack of growth. In many stories, the protagonist's arc revolves around learning from mistakes, embracing setbacks, and evolving as a result. Galadriel, depicted in Rings of Power, seems to have little room for growth. She was already the most powerful, smartest, capable character in almost every situation, leaving little for her to learn or achieve on a personal level. The lone wolf syndrome also really irritates me. While Tolkien's Galadriel was a leader and queen, she also knew the importance of allies and collaboration. In Rings of Power, she is often seen as a lone wolf, defying orders, going on her own without any consequences, or the perspective of those around her. The stubbornness isn't framed as a flaw, but as rather something the audience is meant to root for, yet feels empty. She often seems wrong simply because Galadriel is a protagonist. That really frustrates me. Every character in this show is wrong, but she is right. The sense that Galadriel is a Mary Sue does come with comparisons to other characters in pop culture that have been criticised for similar issues. Bella Swan from Twilight, a blank slate character designed for the reader to uh, project themselves onto. And these characters often seem to be loved and admired by everyone around them, despite having very few qualities or distinctive character moments. They're never interesting. Bella Swan is often criticised for a lack of agency where the plot revolves around her. She rarely drives the story forward in a meaningful way. Everything happens to her. She is a plot MacGuffin. And that with minimal effort or input on her part. In a similar way, Galadriel's journey in Rings of Power seems effortless. She faces little conflict, making her development feel static. When a character always wins, it's difficult for an audience to feel invested in their struggle. And another Bella I will pick up on is Bella from The Summer I Turned Pretty. Can also serve as a cautionary tale for how a protagonist can be poorly written. That Bella is often placed in situations where others are inexplicably drawn to her despite her lack of depth or any real reason for this attraction. While Rings of Power rarely relies on romantic subplots of Galadriel, if any, the parallel is still relative. The world seems to revolve around Galadriel to suit her, and her importance is assumed rather than earned through her actions. And honestly, I think, despite the writing being terrible, for Rings of Power to succeed on a narrative level, it needs characters with depth, who are flawed, and those actions have consequences. Characters like Galadriel should face challenges that feel real and earn their victories, and more than just brute force or determination. In Tolkien's world, power is often tied to wisdom and resistance and understanding, rather than physical combat prowess or raw stubbornness. By focusing so much on Galadriel as a strong warrior and sidelining the complexity and wisdom she possesses in Tolkien's work, The Rings of Power misses the mark. She comes across as one-dimensional, invisible, leaving little room for character development or anything else. Ultimately, audiences crave relatable heroes who struggle and face real consequences and grow from their experience. Rings of Power has failed to capture the magic of Middle-earth, and it needs to rework its portrayal of Galadriel into a character that's not just strong, but also vulnerable, learning, and evolving. The perfection of the Mary Sue may provide short-term thrills, but the flaws and journey of the character are truly what the audience cares about. So tell me what you think in the comments below, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.